While I do respect Noralities' view on anime and her opinions, they get to sort of the absurd side of logic. I simply just can't stand how Ganjin-centric they seem to be. Take her video on Dragon Maiden, it really was so much more so in that vein. And unlike some people, I'm not gonna write her off as a Shokan and just be done with it. The simple fact is that she's applying Western values to the coding of anime, and I think that's rather flawed and really missing the forest for the trees, if you pardon my expression. While it's true, Japanese animation started off sort of at that Disney-esque early pre-war, War II style in the beginning. Probably why she uses the clips she does in her Dragon Maiden video. There is really no example from her video or from what I've seen in general to really connect the Disney coding to anime coding. They seem to fall on completely separate lines of evolution, so to speak. To be frank, I'm not really a fan of Dragon Maid, being more into mature series and not so lighthearted and fluffy anime, so I can't really speak to that series. This trend of using Western ethics and judgment and logic to judge Eastern animation is really getting on my nerves. Uzaki-chan is a prime example of this. Same claims of her being childlike made its way to the surface. Why I only took interest in it for its controversial nature. It was a decent light-hearted manga when you got into it. Not really my cup of tea, but interesting enough as a light ecchi romance comedy of such with a good amount of meme power. If you really want to be honest about anime coding, it would probably more come from the geek culture of the 80s in my personal opinion. Studio Gainax really changed the game in my opinion, and they were pretty much just a den of hardcore otakus who got together to create what they love. No real style, very influenced by what came before. Based on their infamous short little video, the Daikon 4 opening, which showed their influences on their geek sleeves like a badge of honor, despite probably some copyright claims. Another big player at the time was Rumiko Takahashi, who garnered fame off of Those Obnoxious Aliens and really introduced me actually into the anime scene with Ranma 1/2. With most of her serialized manga and their adaptations being rooted in Japanese traditions, folklore, and other little niche little items related to the culture. Even the Disney Japanese counterpart, Ghibli Studios, had really none of the coding normalities included in her video from what I can see. And from the 80s, the anime industry has really expanded further and further out from its roots, with almost every studio crafting their own style. And from what I know, not much of it has been based off of Western anime. In fact, the reverse seems to be true. Sure, there are some overlap and definitely some idea influences that travel across this big vast sea, but take for example, even when they take ideas from the West, they put their own spin on it. Look at what Japanese animation did with the cyberpunk genre in the 80s and 90s. Can you say Akira, Bubblegum Crisis, or Ghost in the Shell was anything like the Western cyberpunks? Maybe a little here and there, but I credit the difference to the psychological differences between those living in the West and East. I think that there is just a bit of a flaw, not just in Normalities' critical process, but in a lot of Western's critics of Japanese animation.
But I went to a fine art school where I learned and studied anatomy, and I have a degree in illustration. So when it comes to art and character design, believe me when I say I know what I'm talking about.
Personally, I never went to art school. My talents didn't really draw in that direction. But I went to college for digital communications. In short, that means I had a lot of media studies classes that I had to take for my program. I also took a lot of psychological classes, but I'm a bit crazy, a little bit too much so to make in that field. But that's also the same reason I was interested in that field of study in the first place, but that's a tangent. So, given that, I guess by her logic, I know what I'm talking about in media studies. And in media studies, there are many things you have to take into account in order to analyze any given piece of media. Sure, design is one element, but context is probably a little more important. So let's get into some of the context between the differences between the East and West. But I really wasn't that good at history. So here's a bit of the history of Japan.
The States is really starting to care about their image. But then Japan spits on them in Hawaii and challenges them to war. And they say yes. And then Germany, as a symbol of friendship, declares war on the United States also. So the United States goes to war in Europe. And they help the gang chase Germany back into Germany. And they also start chasing Japan back into Japan. And they haven't used the bomb yet and are curious to see if it works. So they drop it on Japan. They actually drop 2. United States installed a new government, inspired by the United States government, with just the right ingredients for a post-war economic miracle. And Japan starts making TVs, VCRs, automobiles, and camcorders as fast as they can, and also better than everybody else. They get rich, and the economy goes wild, and then the miracle wears off.
So, does Japan like the West? Some people would be, we argued and conditioned them after the war. But my guess is that it's more of a love-hate relationship. But the differences in culture should be clear with that example. Just the thought process between the East and West and what we had to go through compared to what they went through and how they dealt with it, comparison to how we're really dealing with it now. But that's just me. Even if I'm not, I'm pretty sure that the people who work on anime had much different classes than you, me, Normalities. And before I alienate the few amount of people who are probably still watching this video at this point further by talking about her Dragon Main video, let me address the I'm tired of isekai video. There are a few good points, but I see quite a few problems with it. First of all, it really should have been titled I'm tired of male-centric anime and how isekai is the modern-day representation of that, or something like that, but I guess that would have been too long of a title. Maybe she should have just titled it How I Learned to Hate Subaru and the Male Gaze. Secondly, I will have to agree with her, just not for the reasons she states. And that is, I am tired of people overhyping and praising series that I really couldn't give a rat's ass about. But I'm an adult, and according to her age, she stated on her Instagram, so is she. So, as adults interested in a media that primarily appeals to children and teenagers, we really shouldn't complain too much about that issue. Be adults and look for anime that adults like us can enjoy, and we should praise them and advocate for more of that type, which she sort of does in her own weird way. And to bemoan that shows marketed to women don't get as much of a budget as those marketed towards men, I can say the same about anime that appeals to adults. At least the particular anime that I like as an adult. In the video, she's using my anime list, that felt dirty, Mal, to see what's made for various different groups. Let me state this now. Mal sucks. The tags rarely reflect the audience who will be watching it. And sometimes they're just completely wrong. In the bit where she admits that isekai used to be about female power fantasies, sure, she doesn't use those words, but she grumbles that no, it's mostly male power fantasies, and I find that a bit ironic. If it was about the amount of anime of that type, I could almost agree, but then again, that's sort of taking the context that the anime industry can pump out a shitload more animes now than they could have done in the 90s when it was all about the girls in another world. And bear with me as I show this clip.
Every one anime released marketed towards my gender, 3 more are being made for men with probably a higher budget and resulting higher quality. And that is frustratingly unfair. Statistically, women are more willing to read or watch content that is made by men or stars a male protagonist because they have more empathy or something and are able to more easily slip into the skin of another person despite potential barriers like gender. But also, high production, high quality, good series are being made for and by men. So if women want to be able to experience that good story, we have to learn how to let it go and slip into the skin of male main characters. And men just aren't willing to do that about 90% of the time, and they don't have to, because they can have their pick of the litter of shows catered towards their gender. And I hate it, because one of the most critically acclaimed shonen anime, the gold star, that no other shonen anime can compare to, is goddamn Full Metal Alchemist, which was written by a woman, and the industry still acts like it's a no girls allowed space. And that makes me bitter.
Well, sorry about that, but maybe someone in the comments section can explain why that wasn't totally moronic and stupid. Sorry to use such ableist language. It's a boys only space. Really? But some of the most popular anime were made by women. Nope, I really don't follow her logic. It seems counterproductive. If anything, it proves that both the audience and makers of these animes aren't quite as hung up on gender as Normalities is. I don't know if it's a weird thing with me. I did mention Romiko Tashahashi earlier, right next to Studio Gainax, who spawned Trigger, right? There is so much in this video, both in the clips and even what she says to explain why there's more anime made for men, so to speak, than women. Is she being selfish? Maybe. But who am I to judge, since I realistically think the same thing a good amount of time. Not about more anime being made for men than women, but more anime tuned to children and teens than more adult themed things that I could enjoy. This point also sort of ties into fan service of why there are so many animes made for boys, because why really have a good story when you can just have fan service to get all the stupid boys to watch an anime? That's simple. Probably why there's so many these new animes that are set in fantasy worlds with a multitude of various waifu types for the boys to project their lust on. Say what you want about interspecies reviewers, but I respect that series for cutting through all that silly need for a story, plot. They just cut right through all that bullshit and get to the bits that most of the audience watching are here for the shows, and they do it in a mildly comical fashion if you have a slightly warped sense of humor like me. I'm not saying that there isn't fan service for women. Why else would there be so many topless hunks and pretty boys in some of these animes? What, is it for just the gay guys? Who knows, maybe? But I do believe that it is infinitely easier to do fan service for males. You got boobs, butts, babes, you're gold. Fan service for women is probably much harder to do. After all, I can't imagine dongs out or pitch tents all the time would be very appealing to women in an anime. So, gold star to you girls for not being so easily pulled into the fan service only shows, which probably is frankly more than most people would want to admit. And I can't really say anything about the ReZero bit. I tend to like jerky characters like Subaru, to see them, evolve, grow into better characters. But with Subaru, it is so much slow going and so much suffering and pain. And it doesn't help that he's the type of annoying that really is off-putting to me. And the recent season with all the witches sipping tea, that's just really making me want a second season of Umineko to be produced, and that probably ain't happening. I also ain't gonna speak much to the section, the female anime fan experience. Not really because I'm male. I just don't really get identifying myself as any gender, race, nationality, sexuality, or really even human most of the time, so I really don't get it. I've also been trained in acting when I was younger, so I can put myself in that headspace, but that particular state of mind with all those labels seems so limiting that it really sometimes stray into bigoted thinking when you put yourself in these roles. To me, it's just both illogical and boring most of the time to put such limits on you. Break through the limiters, people. Although I can understand how people view the world. It's a useful tool, so I can sort of understand what she's saying in this section. But really, her and her friends feeling like they should like something because it's popular seems sad to me. For us weirdos, finding anime that suits our taste can be hard because we're the odd ones out. I'll apply to odd males and odd females and probably odd others. Can't forget the others. So pave your own way and don't be afraid to like what you like. And now, unfortunately, I have to finish my thoughts on Dragon Maid. Well, bye to all you who stuck around this long. So here's my thoughts. Who the hell cares if pedos get off on Dragon Maid? I don't care. They're sick people who need to be in therapy until the day they die or somehow cured. But they're still people. Human. One of the many reasons I really don't like the label sometimes. But that's how it is, folks. They're still human with something wrong with them. If there was something in my childhood that messed me up, or genetics that messed me up, really, frankly, more than I already am, I realistically could have been one of them. Any of us could have. Genetics or just fucked up childhood trauma. Thankfully, I'm not. I'm hoping you're not. But you know what? If you are, I feel sorry for you and you have my sympathy. I hope to hell that you are seeking the help you need. And if you're not, I hope you die. Okay. Or, sorry, a little too far there. I hope you're not victimizing any children. But, you know what? If you feel the need to whack it to CP, if you don't know what CP is, I envy you, what that's abbreviation for. But I would rather it be animated CP than the fucking sick alternative. By far, I would rather it be drawn for sickos to get off on and for the alternative in both video form and in the sad, fucked up reality we live in. For everyone else who just enjoys Dragon Maid in a normal way, don't see this as an attack. Okay? It's just dumb social media. I'm not attacking you. Okay? I don't judge you. I don't even judge those people. But you can see how this is problematic for some people and why they're stupid enough to equate A to A+. Let's just go with that. I'm going off the fly here. I'm sure when I was younger, I enjoyed lighthearted series with some ecchi, like Dragon Maid. The proportions of Dragon Maid are way off. That makes me think the coding issue is really a non-issue. Might be some weird fetishy see aside from what's being claimed of child coding, but I'm not too well versed in the art styles of Japan, especially with this considering watch a lot of manga, read a lot of anime, subtitling folks, but I really moved past this sort of content. But I hope watching this series won't turn you into a pedo. And it probably won't, because after all, I really enjoyed Rurouni Kenshin, and I didn't turn into one. Feel free to dislike, leave your comment, even if it's hateful, as long as it's not. Let me not get into that. I'm sure I could say more, but I'm done now.